Steve will be working on put together, because Hillary is not going to be able to make it today. Okay? So having said that, are there any additions or deletions of the agenda?
No.
None? Could I have a motion to accept as presented? Bob? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Adoption of the council meetings of March the 11th. Are there any errors or omissions? Tori?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just not trying to be picky, just clerical. The deputy reeve for the period from February till April is just different than the one that's listed in the minutes. They have Ken is listed as the deputy reeve. That was the only thing that I saw.
Okay. And is somebody going to make a motion to clause as amended? Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. And let's move down and we will do G1. G1. G. Asset management update and plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council.
Oh, just before you start, we did get a copy by email of the document, so you can go back and look that up if you want to follow. You're going to go through it that way?
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just a question. Does anybody here need like a hard copy to review, or is everybody good? Okay. Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council. So Mike, myself, and Chris Vanderhayden, who's sitting behind me, are here today to present Lethbridge County's asset management plan. So it's been a long 3 years for staff and a steep learning curve, but we're very excited to have the opportunity to present this to you today. The asset management plan will assist staff in making recommendations to council with greater clarity on risks and long-term financial implications, and will provide council the information needed to make defendable, data-driven decisions. This plan will assist in achieving the goal of financial sustainability for the county. With an annual taxation increase of 1.6%, the county can achieve sustainability in as little as 10 years. This time frame shows how diligent the county has been over the past few decades in strategically planning or strategically prioritizing projects based on need. And with this asset management plan showing 88% of assets in fair to better condition, the county is poised to become sustainable in a relatively short time frame. As you'll see in Chris's presentation, the county is currently funding 70% of our annual requirement. Without the business tax in place, the county would be funding approximately 47% of this annual requirement, which shows how much our infrastructure depends on this revenue source. Other revenue sources, such as MSI and FGTF, are also vital in keeping up with our infrastructure. But as you know, MSI will be reduced by 25% in the near future, so our other revenue streams are more important than ever. So with that, I'll pass it to Mike to give a brief history of the project, and then he's going to turn it over to Chris to go through the presentation. The presentation is meant to be interactive. If you have any questions during, please feel free to ask. You don't have to wait till the end. We also have a parking lot set up, so if there's a question that comes up that we can't answer right away, we can go back and find the information for you. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council. Good morning. So yeah, as Devin said, I'll just give a brief update and kind of history of where we've been in the last 3 years. So in 2018, the county set out to develop and implement a formal asset management program. Since then, all staff and specifically the asset management team have been working hard to implement a collaborative and seamless approach to asset management. This initial three-phase, 3-year project is complete with the delivery of the asset management plan. This plan is a snapshot in time and will require continual updating and refinement. The goal of this plan is to serve as a guide towards achieving sustainability and to assist council in making strategic decisions regarding infrastructure. The recommendation on the report is that council receive this plan and update for information. Previous council direction and policy. Policy 354, asset management, was passed on April 6, 2017. A little background information on this project. So Lethbridge County committed to taking the necessary steps toward developing a systemic, sustainable, and intelligently structured asset management program. This three-phase process involved the collaboration of public sector digests, or PSDs, asset management team with municipal staff, and over multi-year engagement. The following summarizes key milestones, deliverables achieved throughout the assessment, planning, and implementation phases of this project. We first started off with an asset management policy, which I mentioned was adopted by council in 2017. And then through the roadmap, we delivered an asset management maturity assessment, which was an assessment of our staff resources, what do we have in-house, how are we set up well to start this program. We then did a systems maturity assessment, that's our hardware, software, IT, tech, all that stuff. And a report was delivered in September 2018. The next milestone was a condition assessment program development. So we developed guidelines and a program for developing or getting condition assessments on our inventory, on our assets, as well as putting in cycles to do that into the future and maintaining that. We developed risk and criticality models, life cycle models, what are we going to do to our assets and when. And then we continually refined, we did an asset data review and refinement. We've gone through the data several times with a comb, and we're continually refining it, finding errors and making those adjustments. And so our data is in better shape than it ever has been. We then developed a level of service framework. And so we're set up with that framework, and we'll implement and have level of service discussions in the future. And then finally, today, the asset management plan and a financial strategy included within that. The financial impact of this project over this 3 years, the total project cost has been just shy of $230,000 at $228,200. $100,000 of which is through MAP grants, the Municipal Asset Management Program. That's through FCM. And the other approximately half is through MSI grants, and with a minimal amount coming out of the operating budget of about $9,500. And so continuing on the impact, a robust implementation of formal asset management practices as a business function of the organization will generate efficiencies in staff time and resources. Stronger, more defendable strategic decision-making will ensure the best allocation of resources and funding towards infrastructure management. A solid asset management plan and practice will also strengthen the county's funding opportunities applications in the future. The reasons for these recommendations, to ensure Lethbridge County continues to improve upon the data and information available to staff and council to make sound data-driven decisions through an intelligent, efficient, and sustainable asset management program. That's my brief report. If there's any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said the cuts to the budget was 25%. Is that on both of the grants that we got, the MAP and the MSI?
That's the MSI funding that we're looking at a 25% reduction in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we turn it over to Chris?
PowerPoint there. And then if you just maximize it and then start your slideshow, it should pop up. If you go back out of that. And then just use your, there, now you have your, there we go. Perfect.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council, for having me again on site today. I'm excited to deliver a presentation on the progress in Lethbridge County's asset management plan that we've developed over the last 3 years. One thing I would like to start off with is acknowledging that it was evident after working with Lethbridge County for the last 3 years on this project that Lethbridge County always had some very good, solid asset management practices in place. You know, it may have been working off the sides of their desks at that time, but over the last 3 years, they've really formalized and aligned their asset management program and practices with best practice in the industry. I can say through experience that working with municipalities, counties similar size, Lethbridge County by far has been performing better than the average municipality, and not just here in Alberta, but throughout Canada. It's a bit of a refreshing and positive analysis to see that they're doing so well. The county has been doing very well with their funding models, and we'll talk about that a little bit through the presentation. So I'm sure you're all well aware of what is asset management. It's service delivery. According to ISO 55000, it's a coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from its assets. I call it service delivery. What taxpayers, ratepayers get for their tax dollars. The aim of asset management is delivering that service, but at the lowest possible risk and cost within your program. And again, as Mike had mentioned earlier, the process over the last 3 years is going through those 8 key milestones in building a very best practice asset management program and also an asset management plan. And Mike touched on most of the details behind each one of those components. But again, I just want to reinforce that this is in line with best practice in the industry, and that's not best practice here in just Canada alone, it's worldwide. In line with the IIMM, the International Infrastructure Maintenance Manual out of Australia, along with best practices here in Canada and North America. Asset management summarized. There are many moving parts to asset management: risk management, data management, life cycle analysis, asset management strategies and planning. And without an asset management coordinator, it's hard to keep all these processes on track. Lethbridge County is very lucky to have Mike as their asset management coordinator. A lot of municipalities do not have an asset management coordinator in place, which means everybody involved on the asset management team is basically doing asset management off the sides of their desks. Mike is a key player in keeping your asset management program on track and has all the knowledge now after the 3 years to continue that process. So Lethbridge County's asset management plan. Well, I'm sure we know what that is. It outlines the state of existing municipal infrastructure and the county's financial capacity to meet sustainability requirements, which we will start talking a little bit more about that. But first off, I think it's important, and not only for everyone in the room here today, but the public to understand that when we look at Lethbridge County's comprehensive or complete asset portfolio, it equates to about $1.52 billion in assets. And if you want to break that down, that equates to about $149,000 of infrastructure stock for every person that lives in Lethbridge County. That's a bit of an eye-opener. So that's just showing the public where their tax dollars are going and the amount of effort and funding required to be sustainable. The state of the infrastructure, when we look at the condition of all your assets, now we have to keep in mind that this is a combination of assessed condition and age-based condition on certain asset categories that do not have assessed condition. For the most part, the report card shows that the infrastructure here in Lethbridge County is in very good to very good condition for the majority. Other asset categories, we're relying on solely age-based condition. That means using an estimated useful life and an in-service date to predict what the condition of those assets are. So assessed condition is the key in getting a good projection of what your needs are coming forward. And if we look at those sources of condition, if we break that down, parks by far is the category of assets that needs more work, and there would be some attention focused on that over the years to come, with 0% being assessed. And the reason I say 0%, not 0% that they haven't been inspected for health and safety issues. They do that on a regular basis. But it's not captured in a digital format within your centralized asset management system where you can actually generate reports and projections from that information. It is reports that are not digitally entered into your system, which means we can't run scenarios from that. Bridges is derived from your BIMS inspections. The last 2 BIMS inspections have been applied to your asset management system from 2014 to 2019, which is current to this asset management plan, which is based off the 2019 year-end entries. Buildings, as you're all aware, Lethbridge County undertook a comprehensive building facility assessment program in coordination with ourselves, PSD, to ensure that the data was being captured in a way that we could operationalize it, which means we were able to get it into your asset management system, which now streamlines their processes on how to manage that information and data in the facilities. There was no assessed condition on equipment and fleet. Again, it boils back to not having this information in a format that you can apply it to your asset management system. You have a centralized asset management system now, so going forward in the future, it is important that you start to digitize or have this information digitally represented that you can apply to your asset management system to be able to run all the reports and graphs and projections that are needed. The road.
Just to interrupt you just for a second there, I guess I'm having a little bit of trouble figuring those two out, equipment and fleet, because we do have a fleet equipment reserve, and we do have a system by which we replace equipment as on needed basis and on condition and all the rest of it. So I don't understand why it's considered to be 0% an NA. Like, I'm not quite following that.
Thanks for your question. What we're saying is it's 0% assessed condition when we run the reports out of your AMS, your asset management system, because the assessments or the inspections were not tracked in a digital format to your system. Our system is relying on age-based condition to do those projections. And I understand that you have a process in place. The recommendation is, and we were going to talk about that near the end of the presentation, is to formalize a process to be able to apply this information to your asset management system. So when you run these reports over again in your next iteration of your AMP, it will take into account all of that information that is maybe in a report or in a paper format or another system that's not linked to your AMS. I hope that answers your question.
I struggle with it still, because how do you make a judgment of whether you should replace this or not? I'm kind of having a hard time getting the link between the 2 years.
Yeah, Jeremy's gonna go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay, so for the one balancing point on this is that for fleet and equipment, I mean, we're talking two different things too. The fleet is basically all of our machinery running stuff, or our primarily operation stuff. The equipment portion is like our IT infrastructure, like hard drives and servers and all those pieces. And lots of times those are completely tagged to an age base. Like, we can't tell you what technology on the equipment side is going to essentially outdate itself. Usually, typically, Mr. Berg has those tagged on a 3 to 4 year cycle on a simple basis. That's why we have an age-based assessment. And there's no essentially ongoing condition assessment, because it's not like going out and evaluating a roadway and saying on a paved road structure, it's 10 years old, it's starting to see reflective cracking and those type of things. And when you move into the fleet portion, that's where we have also an age-based rating as well, because we are looking at how many hours, how many years we've been running that piece of equipment and for what purpose. It's not necessarily getting down to the iron cracking on the machine, or we start to see wear on the tires and all that kind of things. Those are just the ongoing maintenance costs. So for the asset management program, the age base is actually the best way, and that's why you'll see on the fleet side, that's why it looks like there's a portion of it that says very poor, it's because it's all age based. It doesn't mean the equipment's not still good, but for instance, we have an excavator that's 10 years old and it has 5,000 hours. It's going to start to look, because of its age base, it's going to look like it's poor on that portion, whereas on the condition assessment, which we haven't been cycling into this program as yet, it's only got 5,000 hours, it still has a lot of life left in it, but we will be pushing that unit probably past what the TCA essentially says is usable life.
So then at the end of that, you have to tell us how you're going to merge the two. Because you do base your equipment on use, hours, and condition, as well as age. So how are you going to get it into the system? If it's going to come out instead of being 0 or NA, how are you going to get to that point? Are you going to
that'll be a formula that we're gonna develop over time. Now, a lot of this information here is straight from 2019. That is something that I'm working on as far as the fleet side. That's what I'm looking at, that long-term equipment forecast, in the short term and the long term. Essentially, to be able to bridge all those things back into this. So we just, in particular on this one right now, we just have not done that portion of the asset management program where we've done a condition assessment on these units. Go ahead, Adam. So, satisfied with the answer. Okay.
Well, what I can say throughout the 3-year process, the main focus at the beginning of this program was core infrastructure. Core infrastructure makes up a majority of your capital. So we prioritized which asset categories we would tackle first, and core infrastructure, meaning your roads, your sanitary, your storm, your water, were first and foremost. It did take a lot of time to refine the data and build these strategies, get assessed condition into the system based on a lot of this information. Now, again, just as Jeremy was mentioning, fleet and other asset categories are definitely a target for the next 2 or 3 years coming to now streamline those processes as well. So again, there's you pick and choose your battles, and throughout this process, core infrastructure was the main focus, just because of the magnitude of the capital that is contained within that. If we looked at the roadway system, Lethbridge County had a co-op student go out and assess the condition on all roads. Now, we know that it's not a seasoned veteran or a professional doing the assessments, but in any case, assessed condition, no matter how high level it is better than age-based condition. So that was a good start. It started the formal process on how Lethbridge County can start incorporating assessments into their program. Storm systems, there currently is no assessed data to date on underground storm networks. Typically that's contracted out through a CCTV or Zoom inspection program, which hasn't been a part of the program here at Lethbridge County as of yet. Wastewater and wastewater systems, there was 13% in the wastewater that was assessed, and that's because these are facilities like lagoons and lift stations that were assessed through the FCAPX report. So there is a percentage of assessed condition for your water, wastewater, but it's specific to facilities. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Just going to the storm systems there, like we're not that far yet, but how would you analyze like storm systems? Because in the future we are going to have numbers on that one too, correct? So how would you analyze that being underground?
Being underground, it's solely based on age right now. It's based on the industry standard estimated useful life that is in your TCA policy for underground pipes and other storm structures, and that's what it's solely based on to date. And one of the key recommendations I will make, and I'll speak to you a little bit later, is that assessed condition by far is the best indication of how your assets are performing. But you need to get to that point and also formalize a process to get it into your system to be able to track it that way. Good. So now we look at service life remaining. Again, this is a combination of projected service life remaining, which is based on assessed values of assets, and also age-based projections. So again, when we look at fleet and equipment and some of the water system, wastewater system, it's a combination of both. It's fairly accurate, but there is room for improvement. It's like anything. Nothing is perfect, and there's always room for improvement. But based on the assessments for the roadway system, 82% of Lethbridge County's roadways are, there is over 10 years estimated useful life remaining. If we look at the bridges, there's 89% with 4% in the no service life remaining, which we know, and there's some capital projects coming forward for the bridge structures. Water system is a relatively new system. When you look at the overall estimated useful life of a water distribution system, Lethbridge County system is fairly young with its infrastructure. Buildings, after the comprehensive assessment, 85% of all major components within all your facilities and buildings here within Lethbridge County have a service life of over 10 years remaining. Now, one thing I didn't mention was These reports are generated on replacement cost values, not individual assets or quantities or counts, but based on the asset portfolio replacement cost. So this is 80, say for buildings, 85% over 10 years estimated useful life remaining represents 85% of the total replacement cost of all major components in all facilities. Fleet, again, because there's lack of information in the system, I'm not saying there's a lack of information, period. It's in a format that we could not apply it to your asset management system at this time. So again, fleet and equipment you have to take with a bit of a grain of salt, that there's some improvements to be made to be able to update these metrics. Storm system, 100% over 10 years remaining, and obviously parks assets, because there is a limited inventory of parks assets. The 3 parks that we have listed are fairly new, so it comes back as being 100% over 10 years remaining.
So based on your previous answers about fleet and equipment, I'm not sure why they're even on this page, because if you say you don't really understand the state of them, how could you say that 25% or 27% of the fleet has no service life remaining? Like, if you don't understand the assessment of it, how can you make that statement? And the same with equipment.
Again, it's based on age-based condition and assumptions. What this indicates is room for improvement. There's gaps in the information, and really what this is showing is over time in your next iteration of your A&P, I'm sure when you revise this A&P, it will reflect now current data and information, because they're going to implement these processes into the program. So again, this is a snapshot in time, as Mike had mentioned earlier. There's always room for improvement. So over time, your next iteration of your MP will be much more accurate with regards to fleet and equipment, because you'll have that information available to generate these reports.
Well, I hate to be a stick in the mud, but if you say we can't assess it, why did you put it in there?
I'll speak to that one, just on the fact that basically, this is an all-encompassing asset management program, so this is taking into account not just, there's a large focus, obviously, the big ticket items are the roadway system and the bridges and the water system and the Hamlet infrastructure in general, but this is all-encompassing, so the asset management portion, fleet is an asset that the county actually owns, so then that portion, it's approximately $17 million worth of assets we have in this fleet equipment, so that has to go into the asset management program. Same thing as the equipment portion. It's something we're accounting for. We're trying to holistically account for every asset that the county potentially has. Even to the extent, you'll see parks is in here as well. It's a very small asset, and it's something that we're building and collecting on, and we're actually put some money into parks in the last little bit, but it's still an asset that the county owns. So this is all encompassing. As much as some of it's not necessarily assessed as well as it could be right now, it still needs to be accounted for as part of the overall asset management plan.
Any comments, questions?
Does that help at all, Warren?
Well, I guess to me, if you're building a plan, you don't have to, you say on one side, you don't have the necessary tools to do it. Why would you put it in here? That's the part I don't understand. If it's not applicable at the present time, it really shouldn't be in here. Until you've actually developed a system that would allow it to be in. It's confusing.
That's a fair comment, for sure. There's definitely, on that aspect, I definitely agree that we can improve on what that is. But we do have that age-based portion that we can go back to on each of these, essentially right now. So it does provide a semblance, and it gets it into that asset management program right now, and gives us a baseline to start from, and also gives us a baseline for other pieces that we need to improve. None of these are all living pieces, and they all need to be accounted for essentially as that living piece on an ongoing basis.
And I guess, through you, Mr. Chair, so just a question too, because I think, Chris, you've said that the clarification, it's better if it's condition-based than age-based, correct?
Yeah.
So when you brought up this slide, just another little piece that I think we could use some clarification on, that you said this is a combination of age and condition. So I think we need to kind of pick, what are we doing? Are we doing condition or are we doing age? You know what I'm saying? So that the plan is consistent all the way through. I think that's kind of a little bit of a piece that's kind of, to me, is kind of a little bit unclear.
Yeah, and I respect everyone's comments and concerns. I think we have to remember, years ago, asset management plans were developed solely based off of age-based condition. It was a financial process where we looked at the TCA, the estimated useful life, the in-service date of an asset, and that's how we determine what our capital needs were going forward. As we progress forward and align ourselves with best practices, assessed condition is giving us a way better picture, a more accurate picture of what those projections are. It's always a work in progress. It will never be 100% perfect because data will always get better. You'll always enrich your information. You'll have new information sources and put more processes in place to ensure that you're using the most accurate data available. And again, this is a reflection of the data available today and the information to be able to include in the asset management plan. And I think, as Jeremy mentioned, it's important to address every asset that the county owns within the asset management plan, whether it's 100% perfect information and data or not. It's showing that there's room for improvement, and those improvements will be made in time. Again, you pick and choose your battles. I can understand why it may not make sense to add assets into the plan that are not 100% perfect or accurate with data. But your last asset management plan back in 2010, I'm sure that you could go back to that and also realize that there's a lot of information in there that probably wasn't accurate at that time as well. It just shows that there's room for improvement no matter which way we look at it. It's continual. It's not a once and done process. The asset management plan is a living, breathing document that now aligns with all of your data and your information in your asset management system. So as you refine your information and data going forward in the future, you're going to be making better data-driven decisions based on this new information and data that becomes available. It's not a perfect answer, but it's always a work in progress. There's no perfect solution at this time. Any other questions? So if we look at what is life cycle management of assets. So scenario one is typically end-of-life replacement. So again, asset management plans years ago, where we're based off of age-based condition, we'd say this is how long we should get the life out of an asset, and this is when we should replace it, and this is the cost of that time to replace it. But we really didn't account for all the things that we do to those assets to extend the life and get the most out of the asset for the lowest possible cost. So again, end-of-life scenario is build, replace. It's doing the worst first. That's that kind of methodology. Lots of municipalities have done that over the years. It has never worked for them. If we look at that graphic to the right, what is the most optimal time to apply a treatment or a preventative maintenance or a rehabilitation to an asset to get the most out of that asset? So doing the right thing to the right asset at the right time at the lowest possible cost and extending the life of the asset. In this next example, this is one of 7 road life cycle scenarios. So different types of roads. So we have priority 1, 2, and 3 gravel roads here in Lethbridge County. You have base stabilized roads. You have hot mix, arterial, collector, and local roads. And here in the county, every single one of those different types of roads takes on a different level of treatment. You can't put them all in one bucket to say this is what we do to gravel roads and this is what we do to asphalt roads. Because of their composition and the estimated useful life of those assets, there are different treatment strategies for all. So we've actually built very comprehensive models into your asset management system. And this example here is just for hot mix arterial roads. And you can see on the deterioration curve on the line, if you're to do nothing to that asset, we have an estimated useful life of 20 years on that asset. Now that's a financial EUL. We've used them for years. That's aligned with your TCA. But if you apply the right treatments, so in the early stages of the asset's life, it's maintenance. It's maintenance to continue the condition of that asset or maintain it at a condition or improve it slightly. From there, you get into the preventative maintenance, so that's your crack sealing, say for a roads example, crack sealing or pothole repairs or spray patching, to further extend out the life of that asset at the lowest possible cost prior to a capital event like a rehabilitation or a full reconstruction. And in this model here, you can see that if Lethbridge County continues and uses this methodology, they typically can get 55 to 60 years out of an asphalt surface or a hot mix asphalt surface on the arterial roads, rather than that end-of-life replacement every 20 years. Now, Lethbridge County has been doing this for many years, but now it's in your system where you can actually generate reports and projections based on this information. These models will be refined over time. I've worked with many municipalities where they have, let's try this experimental treatment strategy. So we're going to build a model based on this experimental treatment that we'll monitor over the next 10 years. So this is now getting into optimizing your life cycle strategies for your different types of assets. And if we look at the cost benefit involved in proactive life cycle management strategy, we run the two different scenarios out of your asset management system, and we're confident that these numbers are correct because roads is one of the asset categories that has a very good detailed inventory with good assessed condition and a good strategy in place. And what we see here is, the difference between annual capital requirements end of life and the proactive life cycle strategies. It's at a cost benefit of about $1.26 million annually for the whole road network. That's a huge savings. But we know that you've been doing treatments to your roads over time, but this is proving that life cycle management of your assets is definitely the best practice and the way to go. And if we look at all asset categories and the forecasted capital requirements, so based on all the information today, on the best information and data available today, Lethbridge County is looking at $8.7 million on an annual basis to fund all asset categories. What we see here is a 10-year window, and it may look like the annual requirements is more than the actual needs. But if we stretch it out over 75 years, 60 to 75 years, over the entirety of the asset's life, on average, you would need $8.7 million annually to be able to fund those programs and also be sustainable in those assets. So for life cycle strategies, road networks, there's 7 comprehensive strategies in place for all the different types of roads. Bridges and buildings are not formal models, but they're derived from the reports and the assessments done by engineers. And within those reports, we've applied all of the events that they have tagged as being replacements, rehabilitations, or repairs. And that's what's driving these calculations. For all other asset categories at this time, it's replacement only, because that's the information and data available. And some assets we don't have life cycle strategies for. We simply just replace them at that time. I like this graphic here. It's the annual capital requirement infrastructure deficit. So annual capital requirements versus the capital funding available based on the information that was provided to PSD. So we're looking here, the roadway system is very well funded. Again, this to me is a good news story. When I compare this to other municipalities I've worked with throughout Canada, the funding model here at Lethbridge County is very solid. I haven't seen an asset management plan that I've delivered to date to have numbers so close. It's a positive sign. So your roadway system, it's almost 100% funded. And as Devin mentioned earlier, your business tax plays a huge role in that. And I think that's where I see the big difference with other municipalities. I've worked with other counties, that business tax isn't part of their funding stream. So it makes up a generous portion of the capital requirements and funding. Fleet, again, it's based on the age of the assets, and that's the best information and data available today. Again, this will get more accurate and more refined over time. Bridges, very well funded as well, slightly underfunded. Water system and wastewater systems, relatively funded as needed, and same with buildings is slightly underfunded. And then, of course, equipment and parks, we need more information and data to get a better indication of where the county actually sits with the funding for those asset categories. Yes.
Just a question on the roadway system there, that it's really close, and partly it also has to do with the debenture that we took out. Of course, we took $13 million out, so that has to show somewhere, and that's why it's a positive way here. But The other ones are not, because we never ever got board money that we could get the stuff up to snuff, so where it should be, right?
I'll just, yeah, maybe
Jen, question.
provide some clarification. So we didn't, the gravel road system in itself, isn't included in this, correct? Chris, this is our hot mix, cold mix, and base stabilized annual requirements. That's correct, Chris? Those three
Yes.
categories, yes.
The AMP is focused on capital.
With the debenture and investing, yes, that investment did go into those roadways, and that definitely does reflect in these findings. Yes, is that what you propose?
Yeah, I want to clarify that these numbers are based on the capital needs of the county, not operational. But, it doesn't take away the fact that you have an extensive gravel road network that I think is replacement value is somewhere in the range of $860 million if you had to replace your gravel roads, which we typically never replace gravel roads. But it still makes up a good portion of the asset portfolio. But today, we're simply, the asset management plan is more directed towards capital, not operating. And thanks for clarifying that, Kevin. So if we look at the infrastructure deficit across all asset categories, on the tax-funded assets, we're looking at an annual deficit. Lethbridge County is looking at an annual deficit based on the information and data available today, about $2.5 million on an annual basis. Rate-funded assets, $88,000. But again, with the decreases in debt over time, that will equalize. So when we get to the financial strategy, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And the total annual deficit, as we mentioned earlier in the AMP, is about $2.6 million annually. So that's the gap in the funding for your capital assets. Now, if we look at the reinvestment rate, so currently, based on all the information and data we have, and we're quite confident here, because when we look at the core infrastructure, it makes up the majority of your capital. Fleet and equipment make up a small portion of your overall portfolio of capital. So when we look at what Lethbridge County is investing, the reinvestment rate currently today is at about 2.1%. And our recommendations are to set a target, a reinvestment rate of about 3% to be able to be sustainable across all asset categories. And if we break that down by asset group, fleet being, slightly under 4% annual capital reinvestment rate today, and a target of 12.6. Again, we know this is based off of the best information and data available today. It's not a 100% true prediction of what your reinvestment rate should be, but as data becomes available and entered into the system, this will change. And the same goes for equipment. But if we look at the roadway system, you're looking at about 3.2% reinvestment rate to be sustainable in your program. 6.2% for parks, but again, according to the numbers and information available, you're investing about $2,000 annually into parks, but we know that there's many more park assets out there that aren't captured in your database yet. And this is a strategy, after working with your park staff, they're actively going to be starting to collect and inventory all park assets across all parks, not just the 3 that are in your inventory today. Your wastewater system, 1.9% is your target reinvestment rate, whereas buildings is slightly under, and you should be targeting around 2.9%. Bridges, we're recommending a 1.7% reinvestment rate, a target reinvestment rate, and 1.3% for your storm sewer infrastructure. Even though it's fairly young and new, you will need to address the needs over time. Not in our lifetime, but eventually sometime in the future, there will be needs for those assets. So when we look at the financial strategy, so after going through this whole program over the last 3 years, we've collected all this information and data. We've updated replacement cost on every single asset possible. So with current replacement costs on core infrastructure, some other asset categories are based off CPI tables and inflationary rates. So for the tax-funded assets, our financial experts at PSD developed a financial strategy that will bring Lethbridge County to sustainability for rate-funded assets over the next 10 years. And what they're recommending is a 16.1% increase in taxes over a 10-year period, which equates to 1.6% annually. This is far lower than any other municipality I've ever worked with. On average, I see anywhere from a 3 to a 4.2% increase annually over a 15 or 20-year plan to meet infrastructure needs and to close the funding gaps with other municipalities. If we look at the water system and water and wastewater systems, after reviewing the information and data, it's a funding model status quo, meaning you really don't have to raise your rates. You have a very solid funding model. There's good revenue streams within your utilities, asset categories. So again, we're recommending a 0% increase on your rates over the next 20 years because your funding model is very strong at this time. Now again, these financial strategies can change. If you were to update your MP 5 years from now, you may find that these numbers may slightly change. But this is your 10, 20-year projections of what you can foresee in the future today. So with that, there are some key recommendations after finalizing the program in the AMP with Lethbridge County. And we're recommending that to apply accurate replacement costs to all assets to ensure that short, medium, and long-term planning are based on the best available estimate of future costs. So again, I had mentioned earlier that we're relying on CPI tables to inflate historical costs to get today's replacement costs. Core infrastructure, they have provided, the county has provided replacement costs against all those assets, so we're very confident that those are replacement costs in today's values. Another key recommendation is to adopt a long-term financial strategy to address the infrastructure deficit across all asset categories. Now, again, this is based on this is sustainable funding sources, revenue streams. We're not incorporating, one-off grants here and there for infrastructure programs and so on. This is sustainable revenue sources. Continue to update and refine asset inventory, specifically parks inventory and the roadside appurtenances. Now, we do know that Lethbridge County has a lot of the roadside appurtenances, signs, culverts, and other assets. They're in inventories, but they're not in your asset management system, meaning you're not really reporting on them from a long-term projection standpoint. Continue to track KPIs to measure current levels of service. So there is a very good operational level of service in place already that Jeremy Wickerson was very nice to share with me on the levels
I'm
of...
just laughing, Wickerson, it's Wixon.
Wixon, I'm sorry.
We'll go with
Wixon. I don't know why I said Wickerson, it's Wixon. My apologies. I should have put it in my notes.
Sorry, Chris, can you just expand on KPIs?
Yes.
Because that's an acronym that's not always familiar.
Yeah, key performance indicators. So when we look at levels of service, and again, many municipalities out there they haven't even defined what their current level of service is, let alone establishing target levels of service of where they'd like to be in the future. Again, I was quite surprised when working with your staff that Lethbridge County had an operational level of service for their gravel roads, priority 1, 2, and 3 gravel roads, which was, that was refreshing to see because we don't see that every day. With that, those key performance indicators will help you track whether, and this is something that you will not define today, tomorrow, or probably over the next year what those target levels of service should be, because it takes a lot of communication and a lot of collaboration between team members and council members to be able to establish that. It's not something that you can just say, yeah, let's set a target and that's what we'll shoot for. There's a lot behind that, and those key performance indicators are part of that. So, for example, a key performance indicator on your road network. What's your total operation and maintenance cost on an annual basis? Is it going up? Is it going down? And to be able to manage our roads at a certain level, how much should we be applying to an operation and maintenance budget to be able to meet the target we want to deliver as a service to the public? And that's just a high-level metric, but for many different categories, a lot of it, levels of service at a high level are based on risk, cost, and condition or performance. So if you were to track those 3 KPIs to start at a high level, you've already started down the right path. A lot of that information is already available in your asset management system. It's just a matter of formalizing how to track it and then establishing some targets from that. Another key recommendation is to identify those proposed levels of service for the future. Where are we today, and where would you like to see yourself be in the future? Maybe 10 years from now or 5 years from now. And then tracking that on an annual basis to see how you're performing with those targets. And just continuous improvement and regular review overall. I highly recommend that, council, elected officials, and your asset management team review your A&P annually. It's not so much updating your A&P annually, but review the information that was provided in that A&P, and then update your A&P about once every 3 to 5 years. Update all the information and the data within that A&P. The good news is here, after this 3-year program, your A&P is now a living, breathing document, meaning it's very easy, it's easier, and it's more of a streamlined approach for, say, the asset management coordinator. I'm not going to say that out loud, but somebody has to update your A&P, but now you can pull that information out of your asset management system. So you've streamlined your process in developing A&P, and I did take a look at your A&P from 2010, and wow, that's quite a lot of information in there. So the good news is now it's in your staff's hands to be able to generate these graphs and reports because we've aligned it with the A&P. And just to wrap up, benefits realized from good asset management practices, good governance and increased accountability to the public. Data-driven decision-making, so basing your decisions off of good information and data rather than subjective opinion or age-based financial information, which we used in the past. Enhance sustainability of infrastructure, improve level of service and quality of life to the public. And the public likes nothing more, everything's about quality of life now. So what do you provide to the public? What's that service you provide, and what's that level of service that you're tracking? Accurate forecasting of infrastructure replacement enhancements needs. So again, it boils back to life cycle management strategies. As time goes on, Lethbridge County will refine how they manage their assets. What life cycle treatments are actually working. Base stabilization gravel roads is one up for, up for experiment. What is the best treatment option for this new strategy or this new type of road system that you have in place? Well, we really don't know, but over time, you will optimize. Your team will optimize what is the most appropriate strategy where we're going to get the best bang for our public dollars, what it boils down to. And compliance with federal and provincial regulations if there's some in place that you need to meet. With that, I will open up the floor to any comments, concerns, questions, and if I can't answer, hopefully one of your skilled staff, senior staff here, or asset management team can answer in my absence.
Yeah, don't look at me, look at these guys behind me.
Well, when I'm looking, I'm just trying to keep my neck from getting kinks, so everybody's everywhere.
Go ahead, Tori.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess maybe just a couple of comments and then maybe kind of just a question. This has been an ongoing project since the beginning of my term here as a councillor, so I think it's rewarding in a sense to see something through from its infancy to where it is today. I know we've butted heads a bit on this, and I don't think that it hasn't necessarily been the smoothest of roads for any of us. I don't think from the council side or from your guys' side. I'm sure there's been some obstacles along the way. I want to just maybe give you guys, the credit you deserve. I know this was a huge undertaking. I know this was a huge financial undertaking, as well as trying to amalgamate all these different sources of information, formats of information. And like I say, just being on this side of the table, just seeing where it was to where we are today, I think it's rewarding. But at the same time, I think, as it's been noted, I think it's also evident that the road doesn't end today. This is very much an ongoing process, and it is extremely important that we strive to provide good information to put into the system. If we put garbage in, we're going to get garbage out. Would that not be fair? So I think it's important that we don't stop here, that we continue to make this current, to keep it current, and to keep it going, or else I fear that it might have been a lot of work for maybe not what we wanted in the end. So I just want to make that statement, I guess. And as well, as a counselor, I think one of the things that I see as my role is providing tools. Staff, administration, residents, they come to us and they ask us to solve problems, and not only to solve problems, but how do we solve problems? And I think one of those solutions is providing tools whether it's a mower to ASB, scraper to construction, IT equipment to administration. We're always being asked to provide these things. And I think this is also, I see this as a tool as well, a tool that can be utilized by staff and by council, but with the caution that, as I said earlier, it's important to know what we're putting into this tool. And it's also, I think, important to ask the right questions. I think that staff and council need to be sure that we're asking the right questions of the asset management program. If we're asking the wrong questions, I don't think that we're going to be any more informed. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind. And that kind of goes to what we were talking about in the fleet and parks and stuff like that. If we ask a question of that today and expect to use that as an informed decision-making tool, I think we'd be failing. So I think it's very important to be mindful of what we're asking of this system. And at the end of the day, it's still important that staff bring council the best information possible. And at the end of the day, staff or council still has to make the best decision possible. And that's not always, I'm sorry, but we live in a political world, and that's not always going to result in this glowing report, a glowing asset management problem, because we're being pulled in so many different directions. If our asset management plan tells us to fix a street, yet we have a groundswell of support for a recreation facility, and we decide to go down that road, and we don't have money to fix that street, that was our decision we made. The asset management program still doesn't make us make decisions. So I just think we have to take a step back, and I know if someone asks me as a resident, they say, well, what does this do for me? I says, it's another tool. And like any tool, it has to be used properly and in the right context. It's not a silver bullet. But I do think that, as you've alluded to, it helps us. It gives us another bullet in the chamber when we go and we seek funding. I think we can make a better informed argument and a better case when we're seeking funding and seeking assistance or partnerships, that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's. And I also think that at the end of the day, when we look back on this, it was a very important step in getting us down the road. And just like I said, good work. I know it's been an undertaking, and I know it'll continue to be an undertaking. I know that we're going to continue to press you guys on this. And thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Just in closing, I would like to say something as well. And I appreciate your comments. Those are very good comments. One thing I will commend Lethbridge County is your asset management team is far beyond one of the most proactive asset management teams I've worked with as well. And I don't want to sound like I'm always pumping tires, but I'm speaking by experience. You have a very solid team here, and they all put the same amount of effort in. I've worked with a lot of municipalities where it's one or two people that are the champions behind asset management, but every one of your team here is a champion in asset management because they're all putting in the equal effort to get to where they are today. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood and everybody knows the effort that goes into this from your team. It's not just from one person, it's from the whole team as a whole.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it was the slide before the recommendations. You had, it was for how much extra investment we would need. Yeah, or maybe the next one. Or whichever the one you were just on before that.
Steve?
This one here?
Either one way or the other from there. Yes, that one.
Okay.
Wastewater and water system, 0% extra funding. Is that kind of what it was saying?
It's saying that, yeah, it's basically, we're recommending that you don't need to change your rates on your utilities because over the years, over the 20 years, it will be sustainable. If you take into consideration the decreases in debt payments, it equalizes. So that's where they come up with that strategy. So it's a status quo funding rates as it is today.
Okay, but it follows inflationary, would it, or
well,
not?
It's based on today's values, and that's why, again, we have to remember when we look at replacement costs of assets, it's based on today's value. We don't inflate replacement costs. We use today's values. So that's why it's very important to update and revise your asset management plan periodically to update it with the most current replacement cost, because we all know that's a moving target when it comes to raw materials, resources, and you know, the human resources to undertake managing your infrastructure. You have to account for the changes in those costs.
Okay, so we need to think about it as a picture for today.
Yes, an asset management plan is a snapshot in time. It's the best prediction of what is coming down the pipe in the future, but again, it needs to be revisited. And that's why I made the recommendation that you as council and the elected officials review this once a year, not necessarily changing it every year, but reviewing it and kind of recapping where we were a year ago prior. And then, in 3 or 5 years from now, you update your asset management plan, and with all that new information and data, you're going to get even a better, clearer prediction of what's coming forward in the next 5 to 10 years. It's an ongoing process. It's never a once and done.
Jen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to elaborate a little bit on what Chris said and for Councillor Campbell's comments. With the water system, like Chris mentioned, we have a lot of debentures that will be finalizing within the next 5 years, which increases our revenues to put towards future capital or reserve dollars. And that is not taking into account any new projects that may be coming up in the future. Additionally, we have implemented local improvement tax on some of the Shaughnessy projects, so that also assists with our funding of infrastructure. So just a couple additional comments there. We do increase our rates based on what the city is doing at minimum annually, and we would have to continue to also do that as well to maintain this.
Boss?
So Jen, what you're saying there is that it depends a lot on the others, like especially with the water and everything that you just mentioned the city there. So with what other people are doing, that affects us quite substantially.
Councilor Vanderveen, if we purchase our water from the city, and then we bill our residents for that. So we just have to ensure that if the city is making changes to their rates, that it will impact us if we're not making those increases as well.
So just one other question, and given the way inflation may possibly go, I'm not sure to say a 0 and 0 is maybe an accurate number. It may be accurate for this year, but it certainly may not be for next year. Like if you were building a house, to say 0% right now would be a real stretch of the imagination. So I think it has to be put in a real context on a year-to-year basis, or maybe even more so than that. Any other questions or comments? Steve?
Just one more comment, and the biggest outcome of this, and you hit on it, was the data-driven decision-making. That way at budget time, we can make that educated decision for what is needed the most rather than the opinion, and that's the biggest outcome I wanted to see out of this too.
Yeah, and that information is also information that you're informing the public based on data, not based on your subjective opinion. So it's also building that accountability and confidence with your tax ratepayers. It's showing accountability at every level.
Any other comments? Morris?
Some other question on, and not necessarily a comment, I think it was a good document for us to look at or whatever. When Steve was just mentioning something about the budget, and that's the steady part. Like, it'd be all of a sudden, figure A, we gotta be like all the young municipalities and go to 0%. And that could get us into a real danger spot, the way I look at it. And is that right?
Again, this is information that you'll make the best judgments based on this information and data. This data is going to help you make those decisions. It's like was mentioned earlier. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve all of the world's problems or all the county's problems when it comes to deficit, but it does give you more informed information and to help you with your decisions.
Any other comments? Questions? Guess not. Got any closing comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Any discussion? Yeah.
I just wanted to, with all the linear effect that all the other counties had, what Chris was more referring to, is it maybe because that we're like on the right track because of not a whole lot of changes financially for the Lethbridge
Well,
County
I
compared
think,
to other ones?
Claus, you might as well wait till they come back because there's nobody to answer the question. Well, Claus has a question yet, so let's wait. Go ahead, Claus.
Yeah, I guess for Mike and Devin, the reason that we look really good in this, can that have something to do with the linear income that hasn't changed a whole lot for the Lethbridge County compared to all the other ones that had to make bigger cuts because of they were affected more, and just name the oil and gas industry?
I would say that's an accurate statement because typically they rely upon that revenue stream, and it's disappearing where we don't really have that revenue stream to rely upon. We're more reliant on taxation and grant funding. So yeah, I would say that's an accurate statement. Councilor Kennedy.
Okay, Morris?
Yeah, I'll.
Any other last comments or questions? So I think it's a great report. I'm just concerned that some of it's a little premature to be put in right at the present time. So I think it's somewhat misleading in a couple of the assumptions. So I guess it has tremendous value, but I don't think I can support it as it is presented today. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Okay, let's move back to subdivisions. First one on, oops. Well, I believe the first one up is 2021-0-013, and it's for the Hamlet of Monarch. But I'm gonna have to have a little technical assistance again.
Oh, okay. Thank you. He was sitting here the whole time and now he's gone. You got the same thing? Okay. I love
So if you go out and come back in, it might work.
I went out to another one and then back into this one.
Well, if you go right out totally. Subdivision application, I got it now. I had to leave it and come back.
How about you? Are you okay?
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
You get it, Bob?
I'm under Monarch.
Yeah.
01, what the, where?
You can get yours, Ken?
Morning.
Yeah, you may have to get a little technical assistance there from George on that one.
You guys okay?
So far, so good, but sort of.
Sort of. Sure is out.
You get it? Okay. Technology marvelous some days. Today's not one of them. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just to start, just a reminder that this application was tabled.
Oh, it has to come off the table.
Yeah, so somebody needs to make a motion to lift from the table.
We have a motion to remove it from the table. Morris? Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, this application, as you should be familiar with, and it was discussed at the last meeting there earlier in March, that is an application by Lethbridge County to subdivide and create some residential lots on the site of the former Hamlet water tower site. As you have been over a number of times, but the county did decommission and remove the water tower infrastructure, which now enables the land to be used for some other use. The application was originally made to create 5 lots on that parcel. The subject parcel is about 255 feet by 155 feet in depth, and 5 lots would result in approximately 51 by 150 feet each for each lot, or 7,652 square feet, which is in excess of the Hamlet residential land use district minimum size of 50 by 100 feet, or 5,000 square feet. Just as you can see from the photo on the site, and to just as a reminder, that parcel does back on to the community association with the hall there, and the playground is to the east of that. So some discussion came up at the last meeting just about the size of the lots, and they're suitable, or if at that size, these ones, as they back onto the community association, the park space there, don't have a rear lane, if a rear lane should be put in and that sort of a thing. So subsequent to the last meeting, as you can see in your report there, that when that was looked at, it would cost approximately $14,500 to put in a rear lane at the back if an external contractor was used. The sale value is estimated to be between $50,000 to $60,000 for the 5 lots for each lot, based on that 51 by 150 or 150 foot size, and then potentially in the 57,000 to 70,000 range if they were the larger lots at the 9,567 square foot size. Just to note that if you went to 4 lots, that would result in 63.73 foot by 150 foot lot if there is no lane in the plan. If a lane was put in, if it was at the standard 25 foot width, then the lots would only be about 125 feet in depth.
So Steve, just before you go too much further, So calculating out the cost of the lots is based on what it costs to remove the water tower and do the improvements in the stub ins, or is it, how do you arrive at the cost of the lot?
Devin may have some information on that. I believe that the price of the lots was based on just what Les had looked at, what some of the lots have gone for or have been selling for in Monarch. I don't know if Devin knows if.
I can add to that.
Go ahead.
Chairman. When Selena Nieboer was here, she did an exercise and did a spreadsheet, and like Steve said, did some comparables in the area, and also did analysis on number of lots, what we get for those lots, and that's where she came up with 5 lots she thought would get the most revenue back for that property. So yeah, she did do an analysis of the area and looked at the different lot configurations and number of lots.
Sorry?
Is that with the back alley?
That was without a back alley at the time.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so depending what council wants to do here, I mean, I said that is an approximate. You're subject to the market, of course, but it's kind of estimated the cost to put the services in would be about $10,000 per lot. So whether you have 4 lots or 5 lots, that would be the per lot cost that you try to recoup in the sale of the lots. But if you're looking at dollar-wise, if you took the upper end, $60,000 and 5 lots, that's about $300,000, or $70,000 for 4 lots, that's $280,000. So, and then depending if you put the lane in or not. So there's, I guess, 3 options. I guess what it is your application, Lethbridge County's, and it's your parcel. So I guess whatever you decide you're comfortable with. But the first option is to approve as was originally applied for, which would be the 5 lots, which would be about the 51 by 150 feet each. Or the second option would be to reduce that and just approve 4 equal-sized lots, which would result in a 63 by 73 foot by 150 foot size each. Which, they say, a larger lot size might be a bit more desirable to a buyer. They would cost a bit more. A con to that would be that maybe if they are assessed a bit higher, maybe they wouldn't sell as quickly. And then the third option is you could go with the original 5 lots that were there and decide on the final plan to that include the rear lane on the east side there, which would cut down the depth a bit. But the county, if a lane's put in, you'd have the cost of construction for that, and then after that would be the ongoing maintenance and such of a back alley, as you normally would as part of the county infrastructure and similar to other lanes in the hamlet there. So I have 3 sets of resolutions here ready for you. So depending on what you as council decide today, what would be your preferred course of action on that?
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think an alley would be important back there, because otherwise you've got people accessing their backyard on another property. I think it'd be a nuisance. I mean, they could be accessing it for yard work, parking an RV, or just parking vehicles all the time, unless it's, I think if people have access, they tend to use it, is the thing.
I would agree with you, Steve. I think no matter if you go for 4 lots or 5 lots, without an alley, you're going to have people driving all over the place. That's just the way people are. Oh, sorry, Tori.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I would just agree with Steve and yourself. I think to me the alley is an attractive option, I think if it's there, it would be utilized. I don't think it would be underutilized. And I'm still in favor of the 5 lots. Option 3, I think it provides the maximum utilization of that plot of land. We've talked at numerous junctures about trying to provide opportunities within our hamlets. That gives us 5 opportunities there for development. And also, I think it also provides that opportunity for that development to take place in the hamlet and not out in the county, which can at times bring other complications, let's say. So I personally am in favor of option 3.
Ross?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At back alley, what kind of how much would that take away from the property? There's a regular size alley, would it be like 20 feet or something?
Typically 25 feet.
So that would mean it would be 25 feet shorter than normal.
Yeah, so they'd have 125 feet depth instead of 150 feet. And the bylaw minimum is 100 feet, so they'd still be 25 feet beyond the minimum standard.
Bob?
I like option 3 too, because that's 5 lots, and then if they want to buy, they're allowed to buy 2 if they want. And it's way, I think it's like 100 feet, but they're going bigger all the time.
Any other comments? I guess personally, I kind of like 4 lots with the back alley, but I think a 50-foot lot's pretty small.
Double.
Anyways, if you're all ready for this, somebody make a motion. Pause.
I would agree with you. I would like to see 4 lots there, because I think that the 50 feet is very narrow to build a house on somehow. You got to build the house in the length that way. And so I would move that we do the four lots and the back alley.
Any other comments? None? I will call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried. Let's move on to subdivision application 2021-0-020. Sheets Magill.
Sheets Magill. The east side of Coaldale. All right, Mr. Chair, this next application in front of you is to do a technically a property line boundary adjustment, but it's a subdivision consolidation of land just to the very west side of the town of Coaldale. It's to reconfigure the property boundaries of 2 adjacent parcels and enlarge a existing 14.13 acre cutoff title by subdividing 6.1 acres from the adjacent south quarter section and consolidating it to the existing parcel, thereby creating an enlarged parcel 20.23 acres in size. Just more, where are we here? To the west more. Where's Coaldale?
Oh, I said Colehurst.
Oh, sorry, Coaldale.
I'm sorry. I thought you said Colehurst.
This is the Sheets Magill one. So just as some background here, the down here.
I see it, I see it, yep.
So the owner who has the current 14.3 cutoff parcel, he has a small rural business associated on there. This cutoff is a parcel that was created by the St. Mary's River Irrigation District years back. It has a cutoff from the northwest quarter of 4920 west of the 4th. So it wasn't a subdivision that was originally approved by Lethbridge County. And then they later sold it as surplus land to a private landowner, and they no longer own it. The current owner of that operates a rural business out of there. He has a number of improvements on the parcel, including a 31,000 square foot building, another shop building, a number of sheds, a waste scale building, and a dugout on there. Due to the triangular shape of the parcel and it being cut off, the owner finds it a bit tight and difficult for trucks and large trailers to circulate and park on there, and with some of the buildings improvements on there. So he's made arrangements with the landowner to the south to subdivide and then consolidate onto his parcel, so it won't be a standalone title. The additional 6.1 acres, which is the area of the dry corner from his neighbor's parcel there, and to consolidate it to his. One of the second portions of the subdivision application is that the plan also is including what we can usually call a panhandle, the driveway access out to the west municipal road allowance. The parcel currently does not have physical access to the public road. Currently, the owner uses part of the Canal Ditch Road, which the SMRD allowed him when they sold him that piece, and an easement that is registered over the southwest quarter of 4920, the one that we're subdividing, to provide legal access to the west municipal road allowance. So there's a easement registered on title there. However, the actual driving lane is partially on the quarter side and is partially on the canal SMRID side. So this application also involves including a 12-meter wide strip of land running parallel to the irrigation canal to be amalgamated or consolidated to an industrial business parcel title, and then that will provide the parcel both direct physical and legal access to the west municipal roadway. So with this application, it is eligible for subdivision consideration in accordance with the county's criteria as a reconfiguration, realignment of titles with no additional titles being created above what presently exists. The land will be subdivided as consolidated by plan of survey, so it's all one parcel in the end. The land is next to the town of boundary of Colville boundary, and within the town of Colville IDP with Lethbridge County, which allows for a reconfiguration of titles. And during the circulation process, the application was sent to the town, and they responded that they had no objections or concerns with the proposal. The remnant agricultural title that being subdivided off of in the end will still meet the county's bylaw for the minimum agricultural parcel size requirements. In the end, with the subdivision consolidation, it will provide the business parcel its direct physical and legal access to the west municipal road allowance, where previously only easement agreement provided the legal access. So with this application, during the circulation and the referral process, there was no objections or concerns received. The ACO gas, if you approve and does require or has requested an easement for a gas line. One of the things, if approving this parcel, the subdivision and consolidation, is that the county will benefit from municipal reserve payment, which be approximately $6,100. That is applicable on the portion being subdivided and consolidated here. Additionally, the future tax situation may improve. The owner there does have some plans to expand his business on the site, which is probably the reason he's looking for the larger parcel here, to develop that business a bit more there that's existing. So overall, the proposal does meet the county's land use bylaw for reconfiguration, realignment of titles. And I have recommended approval to you on the basis that the municipal reserve payment be provided and paid. Taxes are paid and up to date. Development agreements entered into with Lethbridge County. That the portions of land being subdivided and consolidated are done by plan of survey here, so there's no extra or standalone title, and that the easement as requested by ATCO Gas is provided.
Steve, is that subdivision down in the southwest corner already out of that quarter?
Yeah,
Right there.
there's a little yard there in the very southwest corner.
And is there also almost similar on the other side of the canal? Is that a subdivision as well? Up in, right there?
That portion there?
Yeah, is that the same as that other piece that was off the other?
Yes.
The SMRD
Yeah.
did? So that quarter already has a subdivision, so how do we do another one then?
Because with this application, they're doing the consolidation, so there's no standalone or separate subdivision coming out of there. So basically, in the end, what happens is that the white line you see there now is just pushed down, so it's expanded. So this is a realignment of property boundary adjustment, so that gets bumped down to add, so you're making one parcel bigger, one smaller, so it's just that line's coming down, but there's no separate or standalone title being created to that.
But then you're also adding on the piece along the canal for a legal right-of-way, too, right?
Which will also be consolidated in. So it's the existing parcel just being enlarged on its acreage size.
Any other questions? Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a pivot on that quarter? Is that why they made the kind of triangle, the addition?
Yeah, the applicant has indicated here that he says that it's a dry corner.
Can't really tell from that picture.
Yeah, there is
Yeah, it doesn't show up well on this photo, but
But it looks like it is.
yeah.
Oh yeah, here's the line. You can see the circles.
He's got better eyes than me.
There you go. I knew there was a green one that showed with the... Yeah, so it's based on the dry area in the corner there, which is outside the irrigation pivot. Yeah.
Horace?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You were saying there's a business right now, so it's not for residential then?
No, Mr. Chair, there's no residents on site. They run a rural business on there, so they have the shop buildings and some heavy equipment and that sort of things on there, but there's no house or residence.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Tori.
No worries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move the recommendation that subdivision application 2021-0-020 be approved, subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution.
Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thank you. Let's do Subdivision application 2021-0-029, Dronkelaar. Hey, Steve, that Sheets guy, is that the guy who used to be in Fairview? Big Sheets Grain? Is that the same guy?
I don't know.
Same business?
It's
Okay.
Ian Sheets. I'm not sure if that's the same.
I don't know.
Or no, Ellen Sheets. McGill's the guy with the business. All right, Mr. Chair, the next application is 221-0-029 is made by Mr. Dronkelaar. So this is approximately 3 miles north of the hamlet of Island Springs. And they've applied to subdivide an existing farmstead located in the west and southwest portion of the quarter section, which would be the first subdivision out of the quarter section. The applicants have applied to subdivide the main yard area, which contains a dwelling, there's a large shop building there, some other various farm structures and buildings, along with a tree shelter belt. The applicant's proposal also includes land in the very southwest corner, which is mainly pasture land. This area is not farmed or under irrigation pivot. It is physically cut off from the remainder of the quarter section. There's both a long-standing historical well-defined natural drainage ditch through there, and as well there's a dugout kind of in the southeast side there that kind of cuts off and fragments that land from the rest of the cultivated farmland. The dugout the applicant uses for water to the yard. So the applicant has applied to subdivide and include that entire piece there you can see in the green with the yard and a little bit land to the south there that's outside the cultivated land. That does exceed the 10-acre parcel size of the bylaw, so to approve as applied for, which would be the 16.7 acres, would require the consent to a waiver of the subdivision authority. The applicant has asked you to see the merits of his application based on the fragmentation of that corner land from the rest of the cultivated land and the canal ditch that runs through there and cuts it off, as well the improvements and the dugout and such that are on the land to approve that. It is noted that the very southwest corner, if one was to look at and approve just the main yard area at the 10 acres of the bylaw, that would result in there being less than 100 meters in width to the adjacent quarter section line. And under the subdivision policies in your bylaw, you do have a section that does state that if there is less than 100 meters or less to adjacent quarter section line, the proposed yard may be squared off to the quarter section line, so there is no intermediary strip of land left over in between. So if you looked at it on that basis, it would comply with your subdivision criteria, which is under Part 7, Section 5, subsection 5 of the land use bylaw subdivision criteria that does allow for considerations of that to be included in the yard to justify a waiver request. So the applicant has submitted it on that basis. So during the referral and circulation of this application, there was no objections or concerns received. There was no requests by any of the utility companies for any easements for electrical or gas lines or that sort of a thing. So it is the first subdivision from the quarter section. So I guess the main element for consideration of the subdivision authority is whether you strictly adhere to the 10-acre size and not consider the waiver, or you look at the land there and the physical features that are present, and the consideration for the bylaws exemption based on that 100 meters or less strip of land left, and consent to that and approve it with the waiver on that basis. If you're not to grant the waiver and you approved it on the basis that the parcel is not to exceed the 10-acre parcel size, I guess a con to that would be is that the southwest corner would be physically cut off from the remainder of the quarter section and not farmed. Also, I imagine such a decision would be appealed by the applicants. But in looking at the land that's there and the situation with the ditch and the dugout and the way the parcel is, and it does meet the terms of that 100 meters less strip of land left if only 10 acres was to be approved. I have recommended an approval to you on that basis and based on that merit. To do so would be based on the conditions of the taxes are paid and up to date, that a development agreement is entered into the county if required, that a final subdivision plan be provided based on your approval. And in the draft that came out to you, I did have a easement there request if anybody, because we didn't have all the comments back, but it doesn't look like any easements are required. But based on the physical features and on Part 7, Section 5, Subsection 5 of your bylaw, I've recommended approval to you.
Any questions for Steve? So Steve, the little area in the green there to the south, is it subdividable? If you include that, larger size of the parcel from the 10 to the 16 acres, is that subdividable? Or is it, if you were to make it to 16 acres, could you subdivide that little piece on the bottom and build a residence there?
Yeah, that piece to the south there, it is likely buildable on.
It is likely or unlikely?
Likely.
Okay.
Like I say, it doesn't show up very good unless maybe zoom in to see where the drainage ditch goes there. But you can kind of see it there as it runs through and follows the dugout there.
Right.
And then goes by the canals there and over to the or under the road to the other side there to the west, and get kind of an idea of it.
You can see it pretty good there.
Yeah, so that's why this corner is kind of cut off from the other farmland, and why it's not used or cultivated. He can't get machinery and that type of a thing. So,
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very familiar with that whole area, especially that parcel size what they're applying for. And I think you did a great job there, Steve, explaining to it, how the layout is of it, and just like you said in your last comment, it's absolutely never ever the way the drain and everything else is down there, that it's going to be farmable. And that's why I would like to make move the recommendation to the subdivision application 2021-0-029 be approved as presented.
Any other comments? Wow. Seeing none, call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Subdivision application 2021-0-031, Nieboer. Thanks, Steve.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this next application is made by Nieboer, just to the west of the village of Nobleford. It's about 450 meters east of the intersection there, the traffic circle at highways 23 and 519. The application is to subdivide it out an existing established farmyard in the very southeast corner to create a separate title for the residential yard. The yard contains a dwelling on there, a shop, Quonset, and some various minor other farm outbuildings. They have their water provided through the North Potable Water Co-op, and a septic is treated on site by their own private septic field system. The access to this parcel is direct to Highway 519 to the south. A couple things that we have to pay attention to with this parcel is that it is situated within the IDP plan area with the town of Nobleford. That IDP does allow this area between Highway 23, just to the north side of Highway 519, to the village boundary, to be further developed and subdivided out. There are some policies in there that relate to this area is primarily envisioned for highway commercial, light industrial type of use in the future. However, an allowance is made as this is an existing pre-established historical farmyard that's there, that the farmyard could be subdivided out. There is kind of in that IDP with the town of Nobleford, in that intermunicipal development plan, a kind of a conceptual design scheme was done on this west side of Nobleford out to Highway 23, showing how it could be laid out in the future and with road networks and access and that sort of a thing. So one of the things you will note that, because the access is coming from Highway 519, an approval is required from Alberta Transportation on it. As this is an existing farmyard there, Alberta Transportation doesn't have concerns with it. However, one of the requests is that a 20-meter wide service road be dedicated. That's by caveat on title. So what that means is that there's a document registered with the subdivision here identifying that in the future that their access is just temporary, and that in the future, if this area develops more, at some point transportation might start pulling the accesses, and then the service road will need to go in there, so there's not a bunch of multiple direct accesses onto the highway in close proximity to each other and to the traffic circle there at Highway 23. So the parcel to the west is zoned as rural commercial, and that's subdivided out for where the Nieboer dealership is there, that you're familiar with, I'm sure, on the corner. And when that subdivision was done, there was a caveat registered along the frontage of that's on title. So with this subdivision, it would just align and match with that's already there. So down the road in the future, at some future trigger point, whether that's at 3 or 4 more subdivisions or 5 at some future point, when they see some potential traffic impacts, then Alberta Transportation then might request the service road and some of these accesses closed. Now, one of the other things to note is you will see there is a county road on the east side, some developed, but that will provide legal access to the back, to the rear of the parcel there for the ag land, because they're not allowed to directly access or use Highway 23 to the west there. So that would be their access point, which at this point, transportation is okay with that. One of the other items I will mention that because in accordance with the IDP with the town of Nobleford, this subdivision is permissible because it's for the farmstead to come out. But if there's any future subdivision done in this area or out of this quarter section in particular, that then the land would have to be rezoned and an area structure plan done in order to facilitate how that works with the IDP and the concept plan that was created for that, so everything aligns. But this application in front of you is eligible for subdivision consideration as the original farmstead within the quarter section and within the policies of the town of Nobleford intermunicipal development plan. It is situated in what we call planning area 1A of the land use concept plan, which permits the further subdivision. The proposed 7.7 acre yard size and the remnant 105.4 acre agricultural title both comply with the county's bylaw parcel size requirements. And there are no abandoned wells or confined feeding operations that affect this proposal. One of the other aspects I will mention is that because the dealership was already subdivided out, with this application they will have to provide a municipal reserve payment to the county, which will be approximately $4,620. That's applicable based on the assessment and the approximate parcel size. So during the circulation of this application, there was no objections or concerns received. Since I sent it out to you, we did get a couple more comments back from utility companies. Fortis submitted, but there's no easements required. So I have recommended approval to you on the basis that the municipal reserve payment be paid to the county. The standard conditions of the outstanding property taxes paid and development agreement entered into. That development agreement should include terms for the future provision of service road when required. It'd be similar to a development agreement that was done for the Nieboer dealer implementship on the west side there at that time, which is registered on title. That the service road be dedicated by a caveat to be registered on title with the subdivision. That the final plan of survey be provided, and the utility easements if required. And then the final one is that the applicant is responsible for meeting any conditions of the historical resources administrator. I'm not odd in this area, but it is flagged as a provincial historic resource site. We haven't received comments back by the historical resources administrator yet, but a first subdivision is exempt from getting clearance from historical resources. This is the farmstead coming out, but because the dealership is there, we do have to get an indication whether historical resource wants them to apply for what we call clearance or not apply and just say at time of future subdivision or development, they'll usually send a letter that says at that time you must apply for clearance to see if it's going to impact anything. Likely because this is an existing farm, it's already there, the buildings are there, it's not creating a new lot to develop the land, that nothing will be required. But that does have to be addressed before we can sign off on any subdivision. So with those conditions, and based on the IDP and your land use bylaw, I've recommended approval to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the service road is just a formality, but if transportation ever decides they need or want to use it, what happens with the house? Because that 20 meters almost puts it right up to the house, I would assume.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, on this southeast quarter with the yard, because they're deferring it to the future, it will sit there until further subdivision or development happens along there. Now, likely, the owners aren't going to do anything until such time they decide it might be more profitable to flip it to commercial, let's say, or highway commercial or something like that. And at that point, then likely the house won't be an issue because they'll be getting rid of it to do a higher, better use, commercial, industrial type of thing. But as long as it's just sitting there as the farm, whatever, then transportation won't be asking them to put in a service road or whatever. So it's a warning to a prospective purchaser that in the future, if you're to subdivide more, do something different than the farm, then at that time transportation might ask for it.
That's just a follow-up there, so I guess every decision is up to, or sort of that, those decisions are up to the landlord, because any decision they make sort of puts the house in jeopardy, I guess, is.
That's right, yeah.
Whether there's more development towards the corner of the highway or the intersection there.
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
Kind of a follow-up question to the last one. Because you said it was a historic site, how would you go about subdividing it further to the industrial that aren't here? Or is it considered historic? How do you-
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't know if the site itself is historic. The province flags what they've identified as potential historic resource areas, and they flag it by quarter section. So it might not be anything in the yard there. It might be nothing at all, or it could be something up in the northeast or northwest corner. This vicinity along 519 is flagged in it, and it may be. Sometimes even when they have a cultural historic or a building in like Nobleford, or because of the Noble Blade or historic, that this gets flagged with that, they just capture it by the whole area, and then through the process of contacting administrator and then having a closer look and that sort of stuff, they'll say no, it's not, an impact, or there is something on site here, or we know there's teepee rings on site, so we want you to do something, whatever. Just an example, in Village of Carmangay, because there's some teepee rings down the Little Bow, in the Village of Carmangay, and also within the town, the old fire hall is a historic site. So they have the whole section flag, whatever. So every subdivision I do in Carmangay, I got to send it to historic, even though it's largely because of the fire hall in the town and the teepee rings outside on the Little Bow, because they flag it that way. It has to go there, and then usually they come back and say no, it doesn't impact the fire hall or the teepee rings, but that's how they just identify it. And if it's in that capture area, it just has to go to them for clearance, as they call it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look at that, that caveat for a proposed service road, and that would kind of put that, house or the yard in jeopardy if that ever happened. Is it possible that they could maybe realign it and stay on the east side of that proposed yard, and then east and go just by the yard there and then go west? I mean, yeah, stay on the east side, go north of the yard, and then go west again. Would that be a possibility that could maybe happen if a person asked for that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, what transportation does here is they can only deal with each landowner as they subdivide, so they try to each time grab a piece of the puzzle, so eventually all the pieces fit together. But like I said, if the farm's not doing anything, it's sitting the way it is, it sits the way it is, they don't have to do anything. The eventual idea here is that if this area west of Nobleford becomes more of a business park for the county and builds out more, transportation tries to limit accesses, usually to every one per quarter section type of a thing. So we already have one for the implement dealership and one for the yard here. So eventually they want to try to bump out, limit accesses and have a central access more just to the east of Nieboer, is the subdivision we're doing here, and the county road, that you'd come in and go each direction, east, west, wherever, and get it off of the traffic circle on 519. But that would only occur, though, like I said, though, if they further subdivided or did things. There's also some option if they do stuff in the back with our concept plan, that if a road came up on the east side, that they could access off the back, and you might not need any further service road on fronting the highway. So that's why for now it's just identified and it's protected on title, but doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. So they're just, yeah.
I'll move the recommendation that the subdivision application 2021-0-031 be approved, subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution.
All effective. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Good. All right, move down to the next one. Subdivision application 2021 037.
Oh, just 1 second, sorry, Mike. I didn't notice this, sorry, I should have told you earlier.
Sure, I'll let them know.
Yeah, just let them know we, as well wrap up this first.
Certainly.
Yes. Yep.
All right, Mr. Chair, this last application is for file 2021-0-037, Sinke Farms in Sosick, to adjacent landowners. It's located 4.5 miles west of the town of Picture Butte and just over a mile north of Highway 519. And this proposal is a reconfiguration between two properties, which is to accommodate a land swap and property line adjustment in order to account for an irrigation pivot. 11/11/22. Yeah, right there. Yeah. So as you can maybe see in the air photo here, there is an existing yard acreage title taken out. So kind of a rectangular portion there in the corner. As Sarah's showing there in the southeast 11/11/22 west of 4th for an existing yard, which is over 10 acres in size. And the applicants are looking to realign the boundary to account for the irrigation pivot on the agricultural title, which is a neighbor, and enable more land to be included under the irrigation pivot and arm. There will be, in this swap occurring, there will be 1.94 acres of land from the southeast, the agricultural title going to the acreage, and then 2.8 acres of land going from the existing acreage title to being amalgamated to a remnant quarter section title. And the original yard was subdivided in 1990, and at that time, the parcel layout was just based on existing farm there and squared off, and there was no thought or consideration at that time for any irrigation pivot systems on the agricultural portion and such. So the existing yard does contain a dwelling and a garage, Quonset, sheds and a shelter on there. A dugout is in the very west corner. Some agricultural outbuildings and shrubs will be located outside the readjusted boundary on the agricultural portion. The readjusted property line won't go through or affect those buildings at all or impact any setbacks. Eventually those buildings and structures are to be removed on the agricultural portion, and that area be farmed and cultivated under the irrigation pivot. With the property line readjustment, the existing dwellings, private septic field system won't be affected by the reconfigured layout. So what you can see there, largely what they're trying to do there is you can see the irrigation pivot there is they're following the outer line of the irrigation pivot and arm, so it's kind of more of a squashed kind of triangle in the end rather than the rectangular portion like that. So that existing corner, northwest corner of the yard that juts out won't be there anymore. It will be on the agricultural portion of the land. So this proposal is eligible for subdivision consideration in accordance with the reconfiguration, realignment of property title boundary policies. There will be no additional or separate title created in the end about what presently exists. We have two titles now. In the end, we'll start with two, just the shape and size of that acreage will be a little bit smaller, so it's going from 10.03 acres, where it currently is. With this adjustment, it'll be down to 9.16 acres. So the subdivision authority has the discretion to decide on the merits of the readjustment boundary in making a decision on the application, and whether it's a logical proposal based on the information and what the purpose is. So during the circulation of this application, there was no objections or concerns received. I have since received 2 new comments from Forest and ATCO, and neither of them require an easement, so there's no easements required. So I have recommended approval to you based on the reconfiguration policy and no extra title created, and for the reason it is to accommodate the irrigation pivot there on the agricultural portion of land, and make it more efficient and bring some of the land underneath the pivot there. So with that, I've recommended approval to you with the standard conditions of taxes paid and up to date in the development agreement. The third would be that the final survey be done by a plan so that there's no standalone or separate titles. And the original draft resolution had the easements, but as of today with the Fortis and ATCO replying, we don't need any easements at all. If you're doing an approval, nothing is required. So if there's any questions.
No questions? Need a motion then? Morris?
I'll move that application as presented, and can't find the numbers, but it's up to you guys to see it.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is that it? You don't have anything else for us today you need to be here for?
You're going to come back and
And Steve, do we have a copy of the first one we need to sign? Pause. You made the motion on the Monarch. I hope you don't ever inspect for spelling error. Couldn't spell April.
Good.
I do. There you go. Thanks, Steve.
You can stay, Steve, if you'd like. I just want to end.
Oh, stay inside?
Yeah, for this, if you'd like. I'm going to bring that.
Well, you don't think so, but.
In a moment. Yeah, they're going to turn it off in a second because this is technically a closed.
Sorry?
We're going to have to go into close for this.
Where did Monarch go? Is that Monarch?
Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, sorry, just a moment. Right, good afternoon. So Lethbridge County received a development permit application from the City of Lethbridge landfill,
to upgrade their their existing composting facility. So currently, they are, basically they dump their compost on this particular location, process it, and it kind of just sits in that area before it gets trucked off into the landfill itself. So what they're proposing to do is to construct a roughly 14,000 and a half square foot facility. And in this facility, there will be, it'll be a receiving building with a row of composting bunkers, a roller compacted concrete pad for vehicle traffic, and clay-lined product storage pad for the finished product. And it will be going in this location here. So the objective is to divert as much of the compost material as possible from the landfill to extend the life of the facility. So that is what is being proposed for you. Lethbridge County circulated this. There were no objections received. Any comments were taken into consideration. The only requirement was from the fire department, which was included that they submit a safety plan for the construction, and that is a condition that's been put on the drafted development permit, which is attached to the agenda report there. So I guess at this time, are there any questions or concerns? So it would be going right here. Yeah, so this aerial photo is not fully updated, just in terms of how it is now. Their big recycling facility is right here. This area has kind of been reworked. Myself and Hillary had a tour of the site, and everything is very nicely laid out. It's organized, and they're just trying to recycle as much as possible as they can on the property.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So obviously, if it's your needs with proceeding, I guess, that's why it's here, obviously, so.
Yes, so, sorry, the direct control, this property is owned direct control, which anything to be approved on this property has to go through council. And it is, anything to do with the landfill is considered a permitted use. So as long as council has no objections, then we can issue a permit as drafted.
Then I will move the recommendation of the development permit application 2021-056 to be approved as drafted.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. You want to do the next one too?
Sure. Okay, so this next one, let me just bring it up. So these next two development permit applications, 2021-063 and 064 are pertaining to the same property. They just have to have two separate applications. One is for the signage and one is for the actual business. So just wanted to clarify that. So we received an application from Iron River Power Sports. They've purchased this property here in Iron Springs. There's an existing shop on the property, and there's an existing home on the property. The home is being upgraded for the owner of this business to live in with his family, and he intends on running his business, this power sports business, out of this shop. And so power sports includes ATVs, dirt bikes, side-by-sides, personal watercraft, snowmobiles, things of that nature. He's currently operating closer to Picture Butte, but he wants to set up in this particular location. And this half of the property is zoned Hamlet direct control, which is why it's being brought to County Council, as you are the development authority in this case. We circulated the application. There were no concerns received from internally. We also sent letters to almost half of Iron Springs to notify them of the application, and no comments or concerns were received by them either. The work that he's proposing to do would be primarily located within the existing shop. If the equipment he's working on is too large to store in the shop, then it would be stored in a secure area just outside of the shop. He's going to create a secured fenced area. The work he would be doing is essentially repair work to these, the power sport equipment, and then also sell parts for this. So it's not a dealership, it's just a repair service type shop. And as I said, he would be residing on the property. So yes, at this point, I guess if there's any concerns or questions.
Any questions? No questions? Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Directly across the road to the east, and then also the property to the north, those aren't houses, are they? The north is a business, it looks like?
Yes, so let me just pull this out through the chair to Councillor Campbell. So this right here is where the post boxes are. And this, again, it's not an updated aerial photo, but there's a large, this was rezoned a few years ago to Hamlet Industrial, and there's a large business operating on the property, P&W Roofing and Trucking, I think. So they have a large industrial building on it, and there's lots of trucks being parked on the property. So it is becoming more of a commercial hub, shall we say.
Directly north of this property, that one there, that's a business as well?
There's also a business running out of this property as well, correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we could use a motion. Bob? Any further discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And G 2.3, development permit and this for the sign.
Correct. Yes, so Mr. Chairman, this is for the signage for the building, for this proposed business. So the applicant proposes to put a fascia sign, which is basically a board sign attached to a building. It would be on the front of the shop to the east side facing towards Center Street. The size, at the time of application, he wasn't 100% sure of what he was going to put, so he just applied for the largest thing possible, and he can always scale back from that. So it would be no larger than an 8x4 sheet of plywood. And it would have his business logo on it, and it would be located under the existing shop light that's on the building there. At some point in the future, he also might want to paint his business logo on the shop doors, so we included that in the application as well, so that he doesn't have to come back to council. And again, there were no concerns received internally, and no concerns received from any of the landowners, the adjacent affected landowners in Iron Springs who received a notification of it as well.
Any further discussion? Questions? Again, go ahead, Klaus.
I'll move that the development permit application 2021-064 be approved as drafted.
Again, any questions? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. You get to hear me talk again, so the camera's on, so I'm live and streaming already.
What does that mean? Behave yourself?
Yes.
It's the glint of my head will blind the camera. So we're in cahoots. So today I'm presenting 2 items. The first is in regards to the town of Nobleford has made a request to us. Existing right now, just to give a little bit of background information to start with. So Nobleford has a long-standing supply agreement with the county for water. The agreement was started in 2010 and has a volume designation expire in 2027. The county basically acts as the middle person in this agreement, in that the agreement with the town of Nobleford is with Lethbridge County. All of the water supplied goes through the North Co-op. So essentially, we hold the agreement because we are a municipality to another fellow municipality, similar to our agreements with the city of Lethbridge. So they're directly with whoever whoever's within the boundaries of the municipality, and then therefore we're basically relaying that over to the North Co-op. So that's the existing agreement that we have right now. With Nobleford, the amount of water available through the existing agreement is 83,000 cubes. Current usage as of 2020 was 30,000 cubes within that, with the average of the last 5 years being less than that at approximately 26,000 cubes. As the amount used is well below the agreement, and the amount is well below the agreement maximum. Nobleford in their 2021 utility rates charges residents through the North County $1.55 per cube for their water usage, and that's through that rural pipeline. Their water rates have changed over the years, where I think I've attached, one of the attachments is the Nobleford water rate, so you can see that it's gone from about $1.17 up to about $1.55 as what it currently is. So as part of this, Nobleford has asked.
Morris?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So they're allowed to, so many, what was it gonna, 82,000 cubes meter per year? How many gallons is a cube again?
How many gallons is a cube? For 2 point, what's the conversion? 1 gallon, well, it depends on if you're going metric or if you're going imperial gallon. 1 metric gallon is approximately 4.3. I'm not sure what the number is specifically, and then
4.5.
4.5, and then
actually.
Yeah. And
then an imperial one is like 3.8.
Yeah, we don't do imperial.
so,
Except for the water co-op.
Except for the water co-op.
so my follow-up question is, for the North County Public Water Co-op for the rural users down there, but getting it from Nobleford, what does that work out per day if they take the maximum?
If they're
Do you
taking
know?
the
You have a
maximum,
figure on that?
I don't have all those numbers in front of me.
Oh, okay, no, it's fine.
Yeah. I know they're,
Someday maybe I can get it.
yeah, as far as the number of units and the number of users off the existing water line, with that maximum, they're well within their capacity, and the usage is quite low. I think their usage is right in around a cube a day, whereas they're allotted 2 cubes per day, is what that average water usage amounts to for these rural water users. So anyway, through correspondence between the CAO from the town of Nobleford and the CAO for Lethbridge County, their request was basically to the council from the town of Nobleford wish for the county to express their interest in continuing the water agreement. and looking for a resolution of that matter. Essentially to continue it past, go ahead.
Sorry,
Jeremy, I didn't mean to.
No?
I just wanted to add a little bit about that. When Devin and I went out to talk to the CAO in Nobleford last Thursday about the possibility of a subdivision, I did ask why, if this agreement is coming up in 2027, why did you want this resolution of council? And he responded that it was to do future long-term capital planning. So it's more or less an intent of a resolution saying that we intend to continue on getting water. Did I get that correct, Jeremy?
Yep. No, that is very accurate. Yeah, as part of their long-term planning, if they have to expand their water reservoirs, obviously the amount of water that's being used with the amount of users is not even coming close to the capacity of the license. So there is a potential but they have to plan for essentially maximum usage within the rural area. So now I don't have that number in here because I'm still sorting out details as far as how many customers they actually have within that line, and then what would be the potential maximum usage. But obviously with the amount of water being used currently, and that's all metered, that's not a guesstimate, that's all metered and that's been charged out to North Co-op users. So that is accurate to what the usage actually is right now. So I did throw in an alternative here, which is basically we can just take this for information if you want it as an alternative, and we just leave the existing agreement as is doesn't expire till 2027, and we could just continue on and maintain that current one. Their intention of most of their requests in this regard is basically for their own capital planning, so this is just looking long-term. And I don't think any of us can tell you what 2027 looks like after knowing what 2020 and 2021 look like. But it is future-looking, and I don't believe that rural water users will essentially disappear off of this line.
Go ahead, Ann.
I think the request too from Nobleford was that we do pass a council resolution stating our intent. That's what they're looking for.
So as far as just some other details, as far as the financial impact, regional prosperity is connected to the access to potable water. You're not going to see expansion in the rural area if you don't have access to some of these things. That is in regards to potentially truck fills as well as rural water lines. We provide services currently for water monitoring and testing through an MOU with the North County Potable Water Co-op, and that provides services for the Nobleford and Barrens rural areas.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this helps our own long-term planning as well, so that we know we have access to water in the future. My question though is, what was it now? Oh, is there an end date to the new agreement, or does there have to be an end date?
There doesn't have to. Typically every agreement has some kind of expiry date. This one has one ran from 2010 to 2027, which 17 years might seem like a little bit of an odd number. We would just look to further extend that in whatever blocks would be agreeable essentially to Nobleford essentially at that time. Longer term agreements are obviously easier from their aspect or from their aspect or our aspect, because then that can give you stability as far as for that long-term planning versus you got too short of a contract term, then there is some uncertainty around that.
So just, I'm not quite sure, do we actually own the water license, or do we have, and they are our treatment source, or do we get the water from their license and sell it to the North County Water?
This water is from Nobleford, so it's their license. And the North Co-op has access to that water through this. It is a little bit convoluted. The North Co-op has an agreement with the LNID for access to water to be treated, for raw water to be treated through Nobleford that then goes out to the rural water users.
And the reason I ask you the question is because it says here, Lethbridge County holds a license to divert water for this area on behalf of the Lethbridge North County Potable Water Co-op, which expires in 2035.
Yeah.
So when does their license expire, or they got a long-term license? Do you know, like Nobleford? Like, is this something we should be concerned about, this 2035?
I don't think so. Most of these water licenses, honestly, I mean, everything from AEP basically has an expiry at some point. So there is that renewal process, but you never look at that renewal process till you actually get into that stage. I mean, for all the diversions we have off the Old Man River Basin, there is a potential when they come up to the expiry in 2035 that there might be, depending on the usage that we actually see, or depending on potential growth that may or may not exist, there is a potential that AEP or the government in general might start to restrict the amount of water that's actually available. I don't expect an extension because we're not exactly hitting, or sorry, not an extension, expansion of the water that we have allocated just based on our usage is not there.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, I think, as you said before, for our long-term planning, I think we should grant the request or ask for the request to be extended. I don't know what the rest of you think.
Yeah, I think we all.
Ask to extend it? Yeah.
Yeah. We need to motion that. Clause?
Is the recommendation I put in there as far as that council send correspondence to the town of Nobleford to express their interest, support, and commitment to further extending the rural water agreement past 2027 sufficient? Or is there anything else the council would like to add to that motion?
I don't think you need to.
No, I think the motion, the way it reads here, I think that's sufficient.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks. Ag Service Board, or Resource Management Grant updates. Ag Service Board Management Grant update. Yeah.
It's a wordy one. So in the budget deliberations we had back in 2020, there was a question in regards to the Ag Service Board Resource Management Grant. The county had been receiving that grant for 14, I think we were near 10 plus years. I'm not sure what the exact number of years is. Usually it came in 5-year terms in conjunction with the main legislative grant that the county typically gets from the province. So the main ASB legislative grant was reduced by 27% from 146,000 roughly and change down to 123,000. The resource management grant was not funded in 2020, and as now we have just recently received correspondence from the province that they are making an amendment to people who had the extension as part of, sorry, if I call it extension, it's actually called resource management. It used to be called the extension program. The government brought forward an amended agreement that basically added the 91,000 that we had in previous years. Now this is static completely. 91,000 was the amount that we received in the prior agreement from 2015 to 2019. From 2020 to 24 is the new grant agreement, and that would be, we would have the legislative amount at 123,000 as well as the resource management grant now at 91,000 as part of that next 5-year term. So that's the background as far as the cost portion or the financial impact. Now, one thing I do want to note is we did have a deficit within the ASB in 2020 based on the fact that we did not receive the grant. The grant that we have now received or will receive, we will get 2020 as well as 2021, but all of the grant funding will be essentially on 2021's budget allocation year because our books are essentially closed for 2020. So there will be more than likely a surplus within the Ag Service Board this year based on that. I think the deficit was 72,000 last year, and the majority of that was based on the fact that we did not receive the grant, which offset some of our costs. Oh, actually, I do have it in here. The Resource Management Grant Program has been in place since 1992 with Lethbridge County. We have an extensive history of supporting environmentally sustainable agricultural practices, and a program has been in place since that time. The program has evolved over time depending on the trends of the sustainable agriculture. Early programs focused on soil conservation and research and have moved into more extension in general. Some of the things that were the markers essentially of our program previously, I listed off here as kind of strategy goals 1 through 5, environmental farm plans, Canadian Agricultural Partnership, Nutrient Management, Riparian Health, and Agricultural Operations Practices Act. All those things we are looking to continue and deliver on all those same strategic goals essentially within our grant program right now. And we are looking at basically dividing up the duties of meeting the goals of the grant between existing staff. So there will be no, with that in mind, there will be the financial impact essentially on this. Sorry, I had a little pop-up on my screen. The financial impact of this is basically we will be getting that additional funding. With the 2021 budget, the amount for the Resource Management Program was funded for $165,000. So an additional supplement to the program of $74,000 is essentially what we have within the budget, which would be tax support. The 2022 budget and beyond could be adjusted to reduce the amount of tax support required for the program if council so chooses, essentially at that time. Some of the alternatives that the council could enter into is the Resource Management Program in general is just not extended, and we turn down the grant program as is. The pro of that is there would be no more additional supplemental funding for the program, and it could be eliminated, and therefore that would reduce some of the tax support that we currently are putting into the program. The cons of that is Lethbridge has been a leader within this and had great regional success with this program for years, and that program would no longer be supported by the county. Another potential is that the Resource Management Program is further reduced, and that would mean additional supplemental funding for the program could be reduced accordingly. And the cons of that is the grant has stipulated requirements, so if certain parameters of the grant are not met, the grant will be therefore reduced.
Yeah, just a question on the environmental farm plan. Have you heard if there are any provincial changes made on that one? Because I think it was just a one time, and then they were talking about going to 5, and I guess that didn't go over too well, but then to go to 10 years, that had to be done.
The way the government is trending right now, I would expect that the longer is probably, or what might change here in the next short period of time is a little bit of an unknown. The province has downsized their staff in the ag departments that they have currently to quite a bit less. So I would expect that if farm plans are expanded as far as their time, that would probably be the preference of the province, because these are staff-intensive activities. Yeah, unfortunately.
The accepted information and sent it to 2021 to be the fall of budget years 23-24. Any discussion? All questions, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as per the Municipal Government Act, a business tax bylaw must be passed annually after the municipal budget is passed and prior to the business tax rate bylaw being passed. We've attached a copy of the bylaw that has been prepared for 2021. It does not include any changes in content from the previous year's bylaw, other than the years and the bylaw number, of course. So we're submitting it to council for all 3 readings. As you know, through the budget process, the business tax was included as a funding source. Therefore, passing of the business tax would be required. No, it's just the same bylaw, and we just changed the years, pretty much, and the bylaw numbers were the only changes made within this one that's been presented.
Steve, and then Morris, and then Steve.
So, my question is about the business tax down there. How many more years do we have on the, what do you call it again?
The debenture?
Yeah, debenture.
I believe we took it out for 30 years.
3 more years?
30. 30 is what we took it out for. So, but we also staged it.
Okay, yeah.
So we took it out in portions over a 2-year period.
Yeah, right, that's all I wanted.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move first reading of bylaw 21-004, the 2021 business tax bylaw.
Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Dory?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I would move second reading.
Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And now we need a motion to go to third. Bob? Call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Third reading. Ken? Any discussion? Morris? No. Oh, call for the question. Call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks, Jen. Okay,
Thank
let's
you.
do 2021 business tax rate bylaw, number 21-05.
Okay, so with the passing of the business tax bylaw, we can now pass the tax rate bylaw if council agrees with it. Again, there were no changes made to the rates. It's the same as in 2020 and aligns with what was included in the 2021 budget. Of course, council does have the option to not approve or to amend what's included in the attached tax rates. Should it not be approved or move forward, as council is aware, it would reduce funding or create a lack of funding, which would mean projects may have to be canceled or another source of funding would have to be allocated for market access network purposes. I think other than that, just looking for all 3 readings of the tax rate bylaw.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, would somebody care to move first? Bob, or Ken, rather? Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second? Steve? Any discussion or question? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Go to third. Clause? Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And third reading. Morris? Any questions or discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Jen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Okay, we need to go back into camera.